Hello everyone, my name is Serafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we're going to be talking about keywords in Legends of Runeterra. So there are a lot of keywords in this game and each one of them is meant to give you a different, powerful ability that allows you to easily overpower your opponents in a variety of situations. Keywords exist in a lot of card games. For example, in Magic you have Trample, in Yu-Gi-Oh you have Piercing. It just kind of explains a basic concept that's almost universal. Every deck has some keywords in it, and so it's important that you understand which ones are available in Runeterra. And in order for you to understand that, let me quickly recap the combat system. So you have units with power and health, and when you attack something, the power compares to the opponent's health, and then both units take damage equal to the other's power. So like a 2-2 versus a 1-1, the 1-1 dies because it takes 2 damage, and the 2-2 becomes a 2-1. Now, in these instances, you do not take any damage to the Nexus. So even if you have like a 10-4 that attacks into a 1-1, your opponent's not going to take any damage. It's not like having 2 attack position monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! You might think, wait, well, if 1-1s can just stop a 100-100 in their tracks, then aren't token decks like super overpowered in this game? Well, yes, they have a lot of benefit, but there are a lot of keywords that are designed to basically make it so the tokens can't beat high-level units. So the high-level units rely on their keywords to try and make sure that they can actually win the game. Let's take a look at some keywords. So, we have elusive. Elusive is a keyword that is very common among low-cost units, and what it does is it makes it so that you can only be blocked by a unit that has either elusive or sharp sight. Sharp sight is basically just like can block elusive, it doesn't give you anything else. But elusive is you can't be blocked except by another elusive unit. So having the elusive keyword both allows you to evade blockers and also allows you to block other elusive units. It's a double-edged benefit. So if you have like a 1-3 that can attack, and you attack, your opponent could have like an 8-8, but if you have elusive, then they can't block at all. You just hit the Nexus and you move on with your life. Next up, we have quick attack. This is another keyword that is very common among low-cost units. Quick attack is when you attack, you strike before the opponent's blocker. So in most instances, the only benefit this really gives you is if you happen to have as much or more attack than the opponent's health, then you get to win the fight without taking any damage. So for example, if you have a 1-1 with quick attack and your opponent has a 10-5, and that 10-5 has already suffered 4 points of damage and is now a 10-1, if you attack, then you get to slay the 10-1 outright without your opponent even dealing any damage to you. So that's really beneficial. However, of course, quick attack does not force the opponent to block at all. They could just choose to take the damage to the Nexus. Now, quick attack only works when you're attacking. It does not work when you are blocking. So if you are blocking, then you essentially have no keywords at all. Also, it's important to note that while this is the primary benefit of quick attack, there are also other benefits. So for example, let's take a look at Katarina. Okay, so Katarina is a 3-mana 3-2 with quick attack. But her level up condition is I've struck once. When I level up, recall me. So you strike, like let's say that Katarina attacks into a 6-6. If she was just a regular quick attack 3-2, she would deal her 3 damage, the opponent would be left at a 6-3, then it would attack back and kill her. That is how a typical quick attack interaction interacts. However, because the strike resolves before the opponent gets to strike back, Katarina levels up immediately, and then she returns to the hand, and the battle is over. Katarina is safe in your hand, and you could use her level 2 form, and that's really slippery and annoying, which is exactly how Katarina functions, so this is perfect. This is actually brilliant on Konami's, or on Riot's part as to how they designed this card. And there are other cards that have like strike abilities, like, for example, when I strike, I double my power or something like that. Those sorts of things that would, in some instances, not that particular instance, but in some instances would make a difference to the fight if they have quick attack. Okay. Next up, we have Fearsome. Fearsome is a very useful ability for getting around tokens. A fearsome unit can only be blocked by enemies with 3 or more power. So you could have a 10-10, and if it has fearsome, then you can't just throw a 1-1 in front of it. You have to throw a monster that has at least 3 power in front of it. There aren't too many tokens that have 3 power, so you're looking more at like real cards that are going to try and block this unit. Or it goes unblocked and you just take damage to the Nexus. So fearsome units, very useful for punishing decks that rely on weak units, because unlike an ability like Overwhelm, you're not actually forced to fight at all, you just hit the Nexus. Next up, we're going to talk about auto-equip. Auto-equip is not actually a keyword, but it's on a lot of units, and it functions essentially like a keyword, so I'm going to go ahead and include it. When a monster with auto-equip is summoned, it will equip a weapon from your hand, or in a lot of instances, it will simply create a weapon out of thin air, even a weapon that you can't collect, and equip itself. So Jax, for example, automatically equips the Light of Acathia. If you have the Light of Acathia in your hand, which you would only have if you had another Jax that died, then it will equip that Light of Acathia. However, and if it has like, if there's another unit on your board that has the Light of Acathia, it will take it from that unit. That's what auto-equip does. But if it's the first Jax you played in the game, you don't have Light of Acathia, it's not a card that you can collect, it will just create a Light of Acathia out of thin air and equip itself. And Light of Acathia for Jax is 1 mana 0/0 weapon, but it gives Jax quick attack. And then if Jax is leveled up, it also gives him Overwhelm. So 2 easy keywords, pretty nice. Alright, let's see. Brash. Brash is the opposite of fearsome. A brash unit can only be blocked by enemies with 3 or more health. A brash was basically created because a lot of fearsome units were seeing, wait, this unit isn't actually all that good. It's like a 4/1. You know, if I had a 1 mana spell, I could get rid of this card and then attack directly, but I don't. And so this is actually punishing me a lot when this unit isn't even that good. If I had Overwhelm, it would be better. Brash is more like, okay, well, if your opponent has a minion with a decent amount of health, it's probably either going to be a minion that has a lot of attack, so therefore you're actually getting some value out of it, or if it's a unit that doesn't have a lot of attack, your brash unit is not punished for being blocked by it. So for example, like the health is protected obviously, but let's say like a 5/5 brash crashes into a 1/3. That's a lot better than a 5/5 fearsome crashing into a 3/1, because then you have a 5/4 brash unit as opposed to a 5/2 fearsome unit. So brash came after fearsome, and it's kind of like the better version. Nightfall. Nightfall units are pretty fun. If a unit has Nightfall, then it gets a bonus if it is not the first card you played in the round. So for example, if you have 5 mana, you play a 1-cost card, then you summon Aphelios. Aphelios will trigger his Nightfall effect, and then if you have like a 1 mana Nightfall card, you can play that as well, and that will also get the Nightfall benefit, because again, it was not the first card that you played in the turn. So Nightfall is kind of like combo for Rogue and Hearthstone. It's a mechanic that encourages you to play off curve. And in practice, this is kind of frustrating to me because a lot of Nightfall cards, particularly Diana, are very aggressive, which means that playing them off curve feels kind of terrible. So I don't really like this mechanic, but there you go. That's how it works. For Caitlyn, we have traps. So Caitlyn and Teemo create traps in the deck. When you draw Caitlyn's traps, it deals random damage to a unit on your board, and when you draw Teemo's traps, it burns the Nexus. And then if you see a card that says, activate traps, based on the number of traps, that's what they are. It's Caitlyn and Teemo. Aurelia has a tune. A tune is when I'm summoned, gain a spell mana. That's really useful. So there are a lot of units that have a tune that might create a spell in your hand, or maybe they give you a spell in some other way, or they're played in decks like Fizz that care about using a lot of cheap spells. Being able to essentially get 1 mana back off of a card, but only for like good little spells, is pretty nice. And for Aurelia in particular, she creates a 1 mana spell when she's summoned, or 2 mana spell. So it's pretty nice to get the 1 mana back so that you can try and play the card as close to on curve as possible. Spirit. Spirit is a keyword that gives the unit stats. A unit with Spirit gets +1/+1 for each instance of Spirit that it has. Now you can get Spirit innately, like Lilia has Spirit by herself. You can get Spirit from other cards, like Lux Illuminated gives Spirit, even to units that already have Spirit. Or you can use a boost card. If a card says boost, it will double, or not double, it will add an additional of each keyword to an existing card that can have keywords stacked on them. Right now, the only keywords that stack with themselves are Impact, Boost, and Gloom, or Impact, Spirit, and Gloom. So if you see a boost card, you can basically use it to increase the amount of Spirit, give your unit more stats. Alright, Tough. This is one of my favorites. Tough is takes 1 less damage from all sources. So for Lysandra, she has Tough. If you play a card that does 1 damage to all enemies, Lysandra will take no damage. If you play a spell that deals 2 damage to her, she will take 1 damage. You might think that this is essentially like her being a 2-4 instead of a 2-3, which is correct if you are able to deal 4 damage in 1 hit. However, if you need more damage than 1 instance to kill her, each time you are dealing damage to her, she's essentially gaining 1 extra health. If I deal 2 damage to her to start with, then she's only taking 1 damage, she's gaining 1 health. Then if I deal 3 damage to her to try and kill her, she's only taking 2 damage, so she's gaining 2 health. Then I play another spell that deals 2 damage to her. Now I've slain her, but essentially I had to spend an entire extra card, that last 2 damage, to get rid of her. So Tough is a very, very useful effect. Now there are most of the units that have Tough are much bigger than Lysandra. So, like imagine like an 8-8 that has Tough. It's really, really hard to get rid of a card like that. So it's really nice to have Tough on big, powerful units that are meant to be used as blockers or to make trades. You know, even if a unit doesn't have Overwhelm, Tough can make it so that you can easily clear through multiple enemies and at least open up a path to the Nexus without losing too many units. Barrier. Barrier is a very useful keyword. Barrier is negate the next damage that a unit would take, but it lasts only 1 round. So Barrier is a keyword that will go away on its own. And a lot of times a unit with Barrier is meant to be summoned and attack immediately, or they get Barrier from some other card. There are a lot of spells, especially in Demacia, that give units Barrier. But essentially, if you have like a 10-10 and you give it Barrier, you could attack into a 9-9, and your 10-10 would slay the 9-9 and you would take no damage. Unless your opponent played like a spell that dealt 1 damage to it in response to the attack. Then your 10-10 would go down to being a 10-1 because the Barrier is gone. It's like a little bubble that you can pop. Really, really useful. And it encourages a lot people to play fast spells to interact with combat. So this keyword is very healthy for the game, and it's not that common. So Barrier is extremely powerful. It's probably one of the best keywords in the game, but it's not seen on a lot of cards. So, and there you go. Okay. Lurk. Lurking is a Shurima and Bilgewater keyword. When you attack, you check the top card of your deck. If it is a Lurker, then all Lurker allies get +1/+0 everywhere, whether you have drawn them yet or not, whether you have summoned them yet or not. So, for example, if you attack with Rek'Sai on the top of your deck, then you get an extra +1/+0, and if you summon a unit from your hand, that unit will immediately get the +1/+0. This stacks with itself. It's only once per round, except Rek'Sai, triggers an additional time specifically, but other cards, it's once per round. And that is extremely useful for basically making like a super aggressive board, because if you have like 3 units that are 1-cost 1/1s, and then all of them have lurked twice, now they're 1 mana 3/1s. So you can build a board that's very threatening to your opponent's Nexus health total unless they're able to clear it. If you run Lurk. Impact. When a unit strikes while attacking, it deals 1 to the enemy Nexus. So this is a very unique keyword. It involves striking, but only when you are attacking. If you play a spell that causes Tristana to strike an enemy, Impact will not trigger. It's only when she attacks. Impact can stack with itself up to 10 times. So if you have 10 instances of Impact, when you strike an enemy, whether that enemy is the Nexus or another unit, you will deal 10 damage to the enemy Nexus. Pretty nice. Only while attacking, though. If you block, it doesn't trigger. Pretty good. Attach. Attach is basically, I think, only Yumi can do this. Attach me to an ally to give my stats and keywords while I'm attached. When that ally leaves play, recall me, so put it back in the hand. Recall is a keyword that says put back in the hand. This is cute. This is what Yumi does in League, and it's really annoying, and she's really hard to kill, but there you go. Frostbite. Frostbite is a Freljordian keyword. Ash loves this. Set a unit's power to 0 this round, but after the unit has been frostbit, it can gain power, and if a unit is already frostbit, you cannot frostbite it again. So for example, if I frostbite a unit that has 6 power, it will go down to 0. Then if my opponent plays a spell that gives it +3/+0, I cannot then target it with another frostbite effect, because it's already frostbit. It will still have the frostbite animation on it, even though it has attack points, so I won't be able to frostbite it again. This is really useful, and this is how Freljord basically deals with threats. They have a lot of ways to, at burst speed, reduce a unit's attack to 0 so that they can beat over it or safely block it. And then Ash, in particular, has, when she levels up, enemies with 0 power can't block. So if you frostbite enough of the board, you can just attack for lethal and your opponent can't block at all. So, pretty useful. Challenger. I feel like I missed a Challenger unit. I can't believe the first Challenger unit in the game is Braum. Challenger is something that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players will be familiar with. It's basically how Yu-Gi-Oh! Works. You get to choose your blocker. So you can force units to battle, and you can choose which unit would be beneficial to you to fight. So if your opponent has a 5/5 and a 1/1, you can challenge the 1/1, and then you can crash into it and destroy it, and then your 4/4 lives, and you don't have to worry about losing your 4/4 because your opponent blocked it with a 5/5. So Challenger makes combat much more beneficial for you as an attacker, which is good because there are a lot of issues with combat in this game that benefit the defender. So Challenger is very needed, and it's probably one of the most widespread keywords for this reason. Braum also has Regeneration. Regeneration is if you aren't dead, you heal to full at the end of each round. Really, really useful. So Braum has 6 health. If Braum takes 4 damage, he goes back up to being a 0/6 at the end of the turn. Pretty good. Alright, let's see. Hallow. When a hallowed unit dies, for the rest of the game, when ally units attack, hallow your first attacker and give it +1/+0 that round. So if you have like 3 hallowed units that have died, and one of your units attack, the leftmost attacker gets +3/+0 until the end of the turn. So Hallow is basically like you can summon a bunch of units that have Hallow, they all die, and now one of your attackers gets much more powerful, and of course that's going to be an attacker that you choose that has a lot of keywords. Maybe you put an Overwhelm unit or a quick attack unit on the left side, it gets like 4 attack, and now it's a much harder unit for your opponent to deal with. So Hallowed is kind of like building your deck around one big strike. Very similar to Exalted, except it's like exalting from the graveyard in Magic the Gathering. Alright, Overwhelm. I've talked about this multiple times. This is another keyword that's going to make a lot of sense to Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. Excess damage I deal to my blocker is dealt to the enemy nexus. So for example, if you have a 2/6 with Overwhelm and you crash into a 1/1, your opponent will take 1 damage. Overwhelm units tend to have a lot of attack, and they are very, very threatening. One thing that's very important about the way that combat works in Runeterra is if you remove a blocker from the field with a fast spell or a skill, after the blocker has already been declared, the attack is essentially prevented. So like if I put a 1/1 in front of my opponent's 10/10 and then I play Glimpse Beyond, which is tribute a unit to draw 2, my opponent's monster is blocked, but I don't lose anything. Like I got value out of that unit, and I still protected my health total. My unit did not get to strike, so he doesn't take 1 damage, but that's not nearly as valuable to me as drawing 2 cards. Overwhelm turns that completely off. If a unit is removed from the field and was blocking an Overwhelm unit, the Overwhelm unit will just attack the Nexus. So that's really, really nice. So Overwhelm is a very important keyword. Almost all of your decks should have at least 1 Overwhelm unit, or a way to give a unit Overwhelm, some sort of equip or some sort of spell that gives you Overwhelm. Very, very good. I'm sorry, guys. I'm still sick. Updraft. When you updraft, you shuffle a card from your hand into the deck, and its cost gets reduced by 1, and then you get some sort of benefit. Janna updrafts 2 when she's summoned to draw 2 at the next start of the round. Let's see. Stunning. A stun unit is removed from combat immediately, so if you stun a unit as part of a battle, it will immediately be removed from combat on resolution, and then it can't attack or block for the rest of the round. So stunning is a very useful effect. It's very common in Ionia and in Noxus, and it allows you to basically stop your opponents from blocking so that you can crush your opponent with your attackers. Toss. Toss obliterates X non-champion cards from the bottom of your deck. So if you toss 2, you obliterate the bottom 2 cards of your deck that are not champions. You can't toss champions, which is nice, so you never have RNG that ruins your deck by removing all your champions from it. But basically, you're trying to get rid of the rest of your deck. And the reason why you do that is because of another keyword called deep, which we'll cover in a minute. Ambush. Ambush is, if you've never played Magic Gathering, it's kind of hard to understand, but if you play Magic Gathering, Ambush is morph. So you can play an ambush card, and it looks like a shadow in the brush. So you spend a certain amount of mana, you play it, and it is a 2 mana 2/2, and it just says what could be hiding in there. And every unit that has ambush has the same 2/2 card, so your opponent doesn't know what card was ambushed. Then you get a card in your hand, which you can spend. Hold on. Nidalee Ambush. So you spend 2 additional mana, and then you can transform your Shadow in the Brush into Nidalee. So you can summon Nidalee normally, or you can pay 2 mana instead of 4 mana to play her as this Shadow in the Brush, and then transform her into Nidalee as a burst effect. So like your opponent tries to challenge this 2/2, you play the spell card, now she becomes a 5/3, and she kills whatever you were challenging or something like that. Pretty cool. Fated. So Pantheon has Overwhelm, Barrier, and Fated. Fated is the first time each round that an allied card targets the Fated unit, it gets +1/+1 permanently. So, for example, if I play Pantheon, and then I target him with like a card that gives him +1/+1, he gets an additional +1/+1. Cool. Really nice effect. There are a lot of cards that target allies that are very useful, and Fated is just a good way to get lots of stats on one unit. Fury. Fury is a keyword that you see on dragons. When I kill a unit, grant me +1/+1. So if you play a spell that has a unit strike, or if you attack or block and you kill a unit and you survive, you get +1/+1. It's an easy way for Shyvana and other dragons to basically grow stronger and become more threatening. This is another keyword that very much punishes token decks. If you put a bunch of 1/1s in front of a Shyvana, she's just going to be a 7/8 later. So stalling is not going to help you that much. Spell Shield. Negate the next enemy spell or skill that would affect me. Spell Shield is a very, very useful effect. It basically just stops a spell in the same way that Barrier stops damage, except that Spell Shield doesn't go away. Capture. A captured unit is removed from the field, and it is no longer on the board. It's not considered to have died. It's kind of like Obliterate, but it's not, like the unit is not obliterated because it comes back. If a unit, so a captured card is always tied to another card. So Tom Kench can capture a unit, and it's essentially inside of Tom Kench. Then when Tom Kench is removed from the field, the captured unit returns to the field. So a captured unit is always like, it's tied to another card until that card removes the field. Support. If a unit has support, then it, while it is to the left of an attack, the unit directly to the right gets some sort of benefit. So Tarek has support, give me and my support ally tough this round. So if Tarek attacks and he's the only attacker, his support effect doesn't trigger, he doesn't get tough, and neither does anything else. But if you have Tarek and you have a 1/1, then Tarek gives himself and the 1/1 tough, and that's this round. If you put the 1/1 on the left and Tarek on the right, no support. It's only to the right. Gloom. Gloom is essentially the opposite of Spirit. It gives a unit -1 attack and -1 health, and it can stack with itself, and you can boost Gloom. So Gloom is just an enemy spirit. There you go. Augment. Augment is very, very good. Augment is if you play a card that did not start in your deck, you get +1/+0. So there are a lot of ways to generate random cards in Legends of Runeterra because it's a digital card game, and that's fun. It's fun to just randomly create random stuff and like get extra cards, and you don't have to have those cards in your deck, and they could be like all sorts of weird cards. You know, there are cards that level each other up. Like, for example, you have the Deathray Mark 1, which grows into a Deathray Mark 2 in your deck, and then that grows into a Deathray Mark 3. The Deathray Mark 2 and the Deathray Mark 3 are both created cards because they didn't start in the deck, but they are not cards that you would, like, you couldn't, like, have a 2-mana, or you couldn't have a 3-mana deal 3, you know, just by itself. It's pretty powerful for Piltover and Zon specifically because they already have a lot of removal. So this is better than Get Excited, but not by much. But it's cool to have. So yeah. Let's see. Recall. In case you forgot, recall is return a unit to the hand and remove all effects applied to it. So you're going to remove all the enchantments, all sorts of buffs that just goes back to the hand. You can recall your own units. You can recall your opponent's units. You can recall landmarks. Just bounce. Let's see. Evolve. Evolve is a Shuriman keyword that gives a unit +2/+2 if you have, at some point during this game, had units with 6 other unique positive keywords. So, for example, if you have a unit that has Tough, and a unit that has Overwhelm and Quick Attack, and then a unit that has Barrier and Regeneration and Challenger, then that's 6 keywords. Now all your units that have Evolve get +2/+2. Simple enough. Let's see. Enlightened. Whenever it says if you're whenever a card references you being enlightened, that is you having 10 mana. So if you have generated mana from cards, then you are going to hit Enlightenment before turn 10. Otherwise, you're going to hit Enlightenment on turn 10 and onward. Let's see. Daybreak. Daybreak is essentially the opposite of Nightfall. Daybreak is you get a bonus if it's the first card that you play in a round. Now, unlike Nightfall, which is you can benefit multiple cards in a turn, Daybreak by itself is usually only 1 card per turn. To counter this, they have created a card that says it's always day for us. There's a 5-mana unit, it's a follower, that says it's always day for us. As long as that unit is out, every card triggers Daybreak. Lifesteal. Lifesteal is very rare, but it's very valuable. Damage the unit deals heals the Nexus that amount. So if Morgana attacks, you heal yourself for 3. Really, really good. Scout. Scout is during your turn, if you attack with only scout units, so like let's say you have 3 scout units and 3 other units, you declare an attack with only your scout units, then your attack token refreshes. So you get to get a second attack, and you can use it with everybody. So scout is essentially like we go out and we scout, we can get an extra attack off, and then we get to attack again. So it's useful. Scout is like it's a keyword that you have to be really clever with, because the primary benefit of Scout is not necessarily to get extra damage in, but to basically like pass without passing. It allows you to declare an attack and soften up your opponent's board without you playing a card. That way, if your opponent tries to pass again, they can't pass again to end the turn, basically. They have to either play something, or if they pass, then you get another attack, and you just win the game. So Scout is like a way to like force your opponent to start engaging with your board, so that you can then respond to whatever they play before you attack. If that makes sense. It's kind of hard to understand if you haven't actually played the game, but Scout is a very, very intense keyword. Last Breath. Finally found a Last Breath unit. Last Breath is an ability that triggers when the unit dies. It does not trigger when the unit is recalled or when the unit is obliterated, but when it dies. So if you take damage that would kill you, then it triggers. And Anivia is Revive Me transformed into Agnivia. And Agnivia is at the start of the turn. If you're enlightened, transform me back into Anivia and level up. So Anivia basically revives herself as Agnivia, which is very similar to what she does in the real game. Okay. Now we have Ephemeral. Ephemeral is a negative keyword. And Ephemeral is this unit dies when it strikes or at the end of the turn. So ephemeral units come from the Shadow Isles, and they are essentially like revived spirits or ghosts. So a lot of times the Shadow Isles, like, they like to destroy their own units, and then they can bring them back temporarily. It's very, very good at swarming the board. Ephemeral units are essentially like, they feel free because they are usually either overstatted for their cost, or you can summon a lot of them for very little mana. But the idea is that you get your value out of them immediately, and then they are dead. So ephemeral units, either they function kind of like as a removal, or they are essentially like you have to build your entire deck around them to make them any good at all. Vulnerable. Vulnerable is a keyword that came after Challenger, and it is essentially Challenger for your whole board. If a unit has Vulnerable, then any unit on your side of the field can target that vulnerable unit for attacks. So it's a keyword that you give to your opponent. And let's say that I give my opponent's 6/6 Vulnerable. Now my 1/1, my 2/2, my 3/3, my 4/4 can target that unit and pull it over to our side of the field. Vulnerable is a keyword that has a lot of uses, similarly to how Challenger has a lot of uses. So you can use Vulnerable on a weak enemy so that you can make sure that you can destroy that enemy, or you can use Vulnerable on a strong enemy so that you can make sure that when you attack, you have your weakest unit pull that unit to the side so your opponent can't block your stronger units and kill them. So it's very useful to, like, because you attack all at the same time, right? It's not like in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you have to get over a unit that has like 3,000 attack to actually attack your opponent directly. If you have 4 units that have like 2/2 each, and then 1 unit that's a 1/1, and your opponent has 1/8/8, you could just have your 1/1 pull the 8/8 to the side. Your 1/1 will die, but then your 4 2/2s can hit the Nexus. And if 8 damage is enough to kill your opponent, then that 8/8 didn't matter. But if you didn't have the Vulnerable, then they could have blocked one of the 2/2s, and then you would only have 7 damage. See? So that's how you can use Vulnerable in an offensive way. Next up is Formidable. I strike with my health instead of my power. So a unit that has Formidable uses its health for everything. So they usually will have 0 power. So this is a 0/8 that's like basically, for all intents and purposes, just an 8/8. I'll talk about Deathless because Mordekaiser... there's not like a Deathless champion, I don't think, but Mordekaiser references Deathless a lot. So a Deathless character is a character that when it dies, it comes back with 1 health and the Deathless keyword removed. Essentially like a second chance at life. That is every champion. Is that every keyword? It must be. I don't think there's any keywords that don't have a champion for them. Okay, there you go. So that is everything, chat. My name is Serafian. I was thrilled to have all of you with me. Wait, I forgot Deep. So Deep is, it gives your units +3/+3 when you have 15 or less cards left in your deck. So if you toss your cards, like I said before, you just remove cards from your deck, and then when you only have 15 cards left, then all your units with Deep have +3/+3. Really, really good. All right, have a good night.